how do you differentiate your climate policy from those of the other major parties? I know Trump, and we all know Trump has no climate policy. So let's talk about the other people who are talking about the other their policies, especially Democrats.
They are all talk but no do when it actually comes to dealing with the climate crisis. He massively increased fossil fuel production far above what Donald Trump did, and the same was true for Barack Obama.
What changes do you propose to address income inequality in this country? How do you differentiate your climate policy from those of the other major parties? I know Trump, and we all know Trump has no climate policy. So let's talk about the other people who are talking about the other their policies, especially Democrats. So how do you differentiate your policy from their policy as far as climate policy is concerned?
So what they believe in is creating new renewable energy. And so their policies, the Inflation Reduction Act, for example, is mostly about creating renewables, but it doesn't phase out fossil fuels, and that's the problem. So, they are all talk but no do when it actually comes to dealing with the climate crisis. And in fact, the Inflation Reduction Act massively increases fossil fuel extraction. It requires 60 million acres offshore and 2 million acres onshore be auctioned off every year before any major renewable projects can be built. So they talk the talk, but they don't walk the walk, and they are not solving the climate crisis. In fact, they talk about how terrible the Republicans are, but if you actually look at the track record, it's under Joe Biden. He massively increased fossil fuel production far above what Donald Trump did. And the same was true for Barack Obama, who also increased fossil fuel production far more than George Bush. So the Democrats talk the talk, but it's actually smoke and mirrors. They are not solving the climate crisis. They are every bit as dangerous as the Republicans.
You said the facts about drilling and producing more fossil fuel. Biden is doing more than Trump. It is so true. Okay. Steve Bannon said something very interesting. I'm going to come back to that a little bit later in our discussion because I think that's going to be very important on a different context. The context that he used, but I'm going to come back to that. Let's talk about what changes do you, because you mentioned quite a few things, and I'm sure. We all know the politicians don't run the country, but the corporations do. It's so true, right? So when you said about the corporations and tax policies and equalities and stuff like that, cutting the defense budget, you're not going to make a lot of friends in D.C., I'll tell you that much. But what changes do you propose to address income inequality in this country?
Well, for one thing, we have a whole program that calls for a massive economic transition to a fair economy and an economy for working people. Right now, the economy is doing great if you're in the 1%. If you are a multimillionaire and a billionaire, things are great for you. But at the same time, poverty rates in children have actually tripled in the last couple of years, at the same time that that billionaires have doubled their wealth. So all the wrong policies are being created right now. We call for a $25 an hour minimum wage. We call for health care as a human right for everyone paid through a progressive tax base. We call for dealing with the housing emergency through public housing, part of our Green New Deal. When I talked about declaring the climate emergency and releasing over $500 billion every year, some of the climate, emissions are also coming from housing. So we would use some of these dollars, these climate dollars, to actually rebuild housing that is sustainable, renewably powered, and environmentally efficient housing. And this is public housing for people who don't have it. Right now, half of America is struggling to pay the rent, and rates of evictions and homelessness are skyrocketing, and the costs of rent are going up and up. We would establish rent control as a federal program to stop the escalating cost of rent. We would force the private equity companies to put the housing back on the market. Right now, they're buying it up and driving up the cost. We would prohibit that and propose a vacancy tax in order to make it unaffordable to be hoarding housing again. So get that housing that we have back on the market to bring the costs down, implement rent control, and then we're building 15 million units of affordable housing through this major subsidy that is released upon declaring the climate emergency. So that's a very important component. We also call for free public higher education, which this country used to provide. It doesn't anymore. And back when the economy crashed in 2008, our Democratic Congress and the Democratic White House under Obama, they bailed out the crooks on Wall Street that crashed the economy, while homeowners were thrown out and young people were thrown to the dogs with skyrocketing student debt. So we will cancel student debt and make public higher education free. So these are some of the main drivers of growing inequality. These are some of the major policies that we would promote. And I would be glad to talk about how do we do this in a political culture that is bought and paid for by the real estate industry, by the fossil fuel companies, and so on. And we could talk about the power that we have, and in a nutshell, I'll just say, instead of just being a commander-in-chief, we call for the president being the organizer-in-chief in order to help people be the driver of our democracy. Right now it's corporations, it needs to be the people. And there are many ways that we can help bring back the power of the people. We need to have town hall meetings again. Right now, legislators don't meet with their constituents. They meet with their donors, their big donors, instead of their voters. So by bringing back town hall meetings, we will force that accountability. We'll also bring back congressional hearings in order to help educate the public and the press. And we also plan to take the corporate media to court for violation of antitrust laws, so we can start to have a press that serves the public interest and acts as a watchdog on power instead of a lapdog to power, which is what the press in this country currently does.
নিউ ইয়র্ক থেকে সম্প্রচারিত TVN 24 টেলিভিশন বিশ্বজুড়ে বাঙালির কণ্ঠস্বর।